Welcome to the exciting first edition of the Reelygoodfilms Podcast for 2026, where we look back at the films we've reviewed recently, but also look forward to what movies are coming to cinemas and streaming soon. Our recent films were all screened at the BFI London Film Festival, and there were many exciting features being shown. From creating life in Frankenstein, to a man on the run in Roofman, to an unusual job in Rental Family. Also, a musical romance in The History of Sound, the power of song in a community in The Choral, and lastly, a daring daylight heist in The Mastermind. Something for everyone in this diverse selection. Join me as we dive deeper into these films with our extended reviews, and then we'll have an exciting peek into March's movies too. So, now we know what's coming up, let's start with our extended review of Frankenstein. Frankenstein sees Dr. Victor Frankenstein bring a creature to life in a monstrous experiment that leads to the undoing of both the creator and his creation. It was inevitable that Guillermo del Toro would eventually adapt Mary Shelley's iconic novel. Frankenstein is one of those rare horror movies that brings tears of sadness to the audience's eyes at several moments during its runtime. The film is visually striking, a gothic interpretation of the UK in the 19th century that feels like it's plucked from the illustrations of this classic novel. Casting is on point too, and performances feel authentic. I especially enjoyed Christoph Waltz, who carries most of the film's humour. This adaptation infuses Guillermo del Toro's sensibilities into every frame, and fans of the director will be very pleased with the end result. If I were to nitpick, the film can verge into melodrama at times, with a handful of its dialogue spelling things out for the audience. While a surprising amount of the film is practical, some of its CG doesn't quite hold up on a large screen, especially some of its exteriors and moments of intense action. However, this feature is up there with some of the director's best work, and style-wise I would compare it to both Crimson Peak and The Shape of Water, and so Frankenstein is absolutely worth a watch. Our next film has a more humorous tone. Let's jump in to our extended review of Roofman. Roofman sees a criminal on the run from the police hide within a toy store. He adopts a new identity and becomes involved with an employee, beginning a risky relationship. Roofman is based on an interesting true story and makes the most of its premise. The idea of a nice guy whose criminal activities are used to provide for those he cares about is a great basis for a film. Roofman has a good sense of humour and plenty of heart, with a nice central romance and our lead being a kind provider to his own and later his adoptive family. Channing Tatum is sympathetic as our lead, but has fun with his character and isn't afraid to be a little goofy when the script calls for it. Kirsten Dunst is likeable as a struggling mother with a good heart, and her pairing with Tatum in the film feels natural. Roofman also feels like a tribute to the turn of the millennium, with its shot-on-film aesthetic, the Toys R Us store setting, and an altercation with a Tickle Me Elmo. I will say that Channing Tatum's Jeffrey is a little too nice, to the point that it feels a bit over the top. The film shows the real-life Jeffrey Manchester is a nice guy, but Tatum can come across as almost like a lovable puppy at points. There's also an over-reliance on narration, which feels like a storytelling crutch. However, overall, Roofman is a sweet film that is worth a watch. The next film sees us travel to Japan. It's time for our bumper review of Rental Family. Rental Family follows an American actor who struggles to find purpose until he lands an unusual gig, working for a Japanese agency playing stand-in roles for strangers. Rental Family is a film with a lot of heart. It uses the real-life Japanese industry of renting a fake family member, friend, or co-worker to examine some of the social norms within the nation's culture. The film isn't afraid to be critical of norms it deems negative either, but it isn't preachy. Brendan Fraser shines in the lead role, giving a kind, human performance, which makes it easy for audiences to connect with his character. The rest of the cast are also excellent, as the story has many interesting and sympathetic characters. Of particular note is Mari Yamamoto, who plays another actor at this unorthodox agency, whose acting skill is plain to see, not just in great moments of humour, but in more serious moments as well. Rental Family can slightly over-explain itself and Japanese culture, especially early on, but not to the point where it hurts the experience or feels patronising. Its narrative neatness may also put off some viewers, who may feel the film becomes a little too cutesy towards the end. However, despite these minor concerns, what we get overall is a charming film that I'm sure many will enjoy, and therefore it's worth a watch. Film number 4 is a sombre affair, filled with great emotion. Let's head to the US for The History of Sound. The History of Sound sees two men during World War I set out to record the lives, voices, and music of their fellow Americans. The History of Sound is a gentle story about love and companionship that has heaps of atmosphere and charm. The History of Sound creates a lived-in world that gives us a glimpse into the United States in the early 20th century, with a disconnect and inequality between people in the country and those living in cities. Music is central to the film, both thematically and to enhance emotion at key moments. The filmmakers have been very skilled in this regard, with moments of melancholy, grief, and impending injustice all orchestrated in a manner that connects the viewer with the emotions felt at these points in the film. The folk songs that are a central part of the film are allowed to breathe, and are well sung by our leads and members of the supporting cast. Not only do our leads have solid voices that suit the folk music, but they also have wonderful chemistry, which makes the romance believable, allowing the audience to get swept up in their love story. Yet I will say its ending may feel a little unsatisfying for some audience members, but if we were presented with a more upbeat conclusion, it would have been less powerful. Good films often leave you wanting more, and The History of Sound does just that, and so it's worth a watch. Now we're heading to my home turf of the UK. It's time for our extended review of The Choral. The Choral sees a choral society's male members enlist in World War I, leaving a new, demanding chorus master to recruit teenagers. The Choral is a surprisingly upbeat affair, considering its subject matter. Most of the film's wit comes from humorous dialogue delivered by a cast of likeable characters. The film shines in these everyday moments where conversations between the members of the choral society show us their personalities. The choral takes its music seriously, and there is plenty of great singing and some intentionally less than stellar vocals. In terms of acting, we also have some great performances from the likes of Ralph Fiennes and Roger Allam. The film can fail to make the most of dramatic moments, seeking to return to the light mood as soon as possible, and there are a few puzzling choices, including a subplot, but these are small blemishes on an enjoyable experience. The most powerful moment for me features a clever use of the national anthem for a dramatic beat, and is followed by a comedic release of tension which raised it above other dramatic moments which can border on melodrama. The Choral, in many ways, feels very classic in terms of its story and emotional beats, a very British sort of drama which I hope will always have an audience. Overall, while slightly flawed, The Choral is worth a watch. Our final film has some delightfully dry wit. It's time for our bumper review of The Mastermind. The Mastermind follows a failed architect who steals paintings from a museum and is relegated to a life on the run. The Mastermind starts off very promisingly, with witty dialogue and an engaging and lovably hapless lead. Its humour and characterisation are its greatest strengths, alongside Josh O'Connor's likeable performance. However, once the initial excitement of the heist is over, its pace falls off a cliff, as does any sense of an engaging plot. Our lead is a fun character. It's just a shame the film doesn't seem to know what to do with him for much of the runtime. The film can be genuinely funny, in a dry sort of way. That means that at points it is at least somewhat enjoyable. However, it's not good enough to have an idea and good casting if the events of the story lack direction and fail to build up to anything significantly meaningful. By accident, I caught the film with audio descriptive subtitles, which made the film's insufficient efforts at tension unintentionally funny, as its frequent use of music to add interest were highlighted by repetitive descriptions of its jazz interludes, using phrases such as intriguing mid-paced jazz and elegant, glamorous trumpet notes, the latter being used for more sombre moments. There are few things more frustrating in a film than a premise and characters whose potential are wasted. Therefore, The Mastermind is worth a skip. Now that we've looked back at the exciting films screened at the BFI London Film Festival, let's sample what March has to offer. Hoppers leaps into theatres on March 6th. It follows animal lover Mabel, who uses technology to place her consciousness into a robotic beaver to uncover mysteries within the animal world beyond her imagination. Hoppers looks like it's filled with a quirky energy that feels more typical of DreamWorks films like Over the Hedge than Disney and Pixar. However, this is no bad thing, as the trailer immediately draws us into the film's world and holds our attention with its out-of-left-field humour. There's a sense of fun here that is immediately appealing, and while it's clear the lesson the film is trying to convey, it seems like it's going to be an entertainment-first film. I'll be interested to see it. Reminders of Him comes to theatres on March 13th. It follows a woman who attempts to reconnect with her young daughter after being released from prison, but faces resistance from everyone except for a bar owner with ties to her child. Reminders of Him looks to tug at your heartstrings and not let go. It seems like an emotive tale of redemption that is likely to have audience members teary-eyed for at least some of its runtime. Hopefully the film gives its narrative enough depth to avoid any accusations of melodrama and produces something memorable. If so, it may be worth seeing upon its release. Project Hail Mary launches into cinemas on March 20th. Project Hail Mary sees a science teacher turned reluctant astronaut try to save Earth while alone in outer space. Project Hail Mary seems like it's seeking to create a grand science fiction adventure that's infused with a good deal of humour. As such, it may prove a more uplifting experience than most of the somewhat recent science fiction movies it may be compared to. Ryan Gosling looks like he's on full charm offensive here as our fish out of water lead, and it seems like there's an interesting story to back up his performance. While I do think the trailer gives too much of the film's narrative away, I'm looking forward to seeing Project Hail Mary upon its release. Well, that's it for this debut edition of the Really Good Films podcast for 2026. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you want more from Really Good Films, follow us on social media, and of course, subscribe to the podcast too, wherever you get your podcasts. We can't wait to review more films for you soon.